So here we are, another episode of Just Briefly. We have Mr. Jonathan Taylor, who is the director of Sonder Consultants in London. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Kev.
John, JT, let's start broad. How would you describe the London legal market right now?
It is busy in relation to the number of vacancies and the demand for lawyers at the associate level across practice areas. It is how the standards are as high as they've been, and they've been like this for a while. By that, I mean, despite how busy it is and how much opportunity there is, firms can afford to be and are being very selective, and in many situations are in no need to rush. So I think from our side as recruiters, it's a very good market, but still difficult. I think for lawyers who are minded to consider a move, it's a good market. There are lots of different firms. Whatever your motivation it may be to consider a move, there should be an option out there for you.
It's super interesting that you speak to so many different associates, and one associate could be at one firm and be super quiet. Then you could be speaking to another associate who's at a firm across the road who's working 6 days a week and is super busy. He's got deal flows really, really strong. But what do you reckon that is?
Well, I think there was a lot of consolidation in the market, perhaps 18 months, 2 years ago, where the sort of market shifted, where the M&A market got a little bit more difficult a few years ago. A lot of the work that was around was the more complicated, sophisticated work, and that work was then went back to the, perhaps you could say, the more established or the leading teams in the market. And a lot of the teams that were built up over the previous 15 years in 0% interest rate environment perhaps lost that work. So I think the work went back to a few core teams. It's now sort of spreading out again. I think that's probably the main reason is we are in a, if it does feel we're in a sort of transitional market where, you know, the leading players really do have all the perhaps a lot of the more interesting work, and there are teams where you can be less busy.
And how detrimental do you think that is to someone's career? Say an associate who hasn't been busy for the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, it can be very detrimental. You aren't progressing at the same rate as your peers in the market, which presents more of a problem if you want to move, because you're being compared to people at your level in that team who may have had a lot more responsibility and that had the option of doing more work. Or you ride it out where you are, which comes with risk, and you obviously where you are a known quantity and you impress. You know, if the market shifts, the market work comes back, it's busy again, then you're going to be in a good position for promotion. So, but it comes with a bit of risk. But I think if you are a junior lawyer or junior to mid, and you are in a team which isn't busy, you know, every 3-4 months counts. You can't really afford to have a period of a year where you are progressing at the same rate as your peers in the market at other firms.
And what I found really compelling over the last 6 to 12 months is when we're on briefings, the amount of BD experience and the amount of B involvement some associates are meant to have or that are wanted to have. And whereas in the past would have been about senior associates, would have been about junior partners working under BD, but I think now it's being required at a much earlier stage. So what do you think that is as well? And what tips could you give someone who's looking maybe as an associate to get to build out their BD expertise?
Yeah, well, you have to make it happen for yourself. And I think there was a very common criticism senior associates would have or used to have, was that they are suddenly expected to be brilliant business developers at 7, 8, 9 PQE, 10 PQE, and they could be critical that they didn't receive that development. They were more junior. I think firms would say that option was always there, but maybe perhaps they weren't naturally suited to it. And maybe it's the case that that ability to develop new business, which can be learnt, but often is to many people a natural attribute. I think that with those who are sort of junior, mid-level lawyers now have grown up with social media and are more comfortable with promoting themselves or having their own brand, and therefore I think that lends itself to getting out in the market more. But I think in the same breath as talking about work consolidating back to certain firms or teams, I think the days of one partner from a top tier firm put to me once, over the next 5 to 8 years, the days of being able to become a partner in a team just through servicing the work that others were generating were gone. It may be a bit of a overstating it, because there's always going to be room for that type of promotion, but it was implying that you have to be out there to and win your own business and build that your own brand in order to become a make partner. So perhaps that's just filtered that over the last few years. That's filtered down to more junior ranks, and partners who are hiring partners are more conscious that they're looking for those qualities in people, be they 2, 3 PQE, or even if you when you're looking to bring a trainee into your team as a NQ, perhaps.
You're even looking at the tier system that a lot of law firms are adopting right now, trying to encourage associates and 6 to 7 year associates to go out there and start building their book of business with a title. Do you think the law firm strategy has changed over the last couple of years? And what do you think about that tier system at law firms?
With the junior partner, so the non-equity tier partnership, I think there is a trend in that direction. I think it's having the title for which to face the market and build your business and having the title to go with that is helpful, and clearly it works. There is typically a 3, 4 year limit on how long that can go before you've proved yourself or not. I think it's a benefit to the individual and to the firm in the long run. I think it's a very competitive market, and therefore those that demonstrate that, the sooner someone is allowed out to try and develop those attributes that lend themselves to developing new business and building relationships, the sooner they're exposed to that, the better. So I think in that respect, having titles like that, 6, 7 PQE, and with the culture, you're expected to go out and face the market with that and prove yourself, I think it's a positive thing.
It's at the end of the day, a law firm is a business. You might be the most technically gifted lawyer, but unless you're able to go out there and generate new business, you're not going to have a long-term career in private practice.
No, well, the reality is that not everyone wants to make partner, but there are a fraction of the people who start their career in private practice become partners, and so there are certain qualities that you need in order to get there. Yeah, I think as AI, there, as everyone knows, legal tech and AI has been adopted across the larger transactional teams in the city, and that will change everything. And that, I think that this is all happening as we're speaking, but I think there's a general feeling that will free up those who are at the mid-level and senior associate level to perhaps do more business development, as due diligence and the work that would typically take a long time for a lot of people to do is done in a matter of hours by a tech tool. Perhaps that's where the role of lawyers at 2, 3, 4 PQE are going to be going out and able to win more work at that more junior level, because that's something that can't be automated.
And so, what do you think are the key practice areas that are driving the market in London specifically this year? And what do you expect in
S-
2026?
It's the private equity sector still. Within private equity, there's of course the A role, leverage finance. I think fund finance, structured credit, private credit is having its moment. It's very difficult to find. We can't find appropriate lawyers for the number of roles that are out there. It's very candidate dry. You know, in relation to deals, capital markets is still very quiet, of course. But A has seen a real resurgence this year, and certainly in my team in London, we're probably experienced the busiest market for disputes lawyers that we've seen for a while. So it's busy across the board. I expect with the caveat that if we look a few months into the future, we're going to continue as we are. I think it's going to continue to be a busy deals market, and those core practice areas that private equity rely on will still be busy. I think the fund formation market's come back the recruitment market for fund formation lawyers is a bit stronger now than it was at the start of the year. So I think that's a good sign for new investment, and we should see that continue the M&A, certainly property financing wave to continue. We've had there was a record-breaking year previous year for partner moves in the city. So to the extent we'll see that again, we don't know. But we'll certainly see all the work that's come from all those moves start to filter down.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned disputes because a lot of the briefings that we're getting at right now are not just one disputes role, looking for 8 or 9 associates, sometimes even 10, which is really telling sign in terms of, you know, how busy that market is and how many disputes that are happening in not just in the local market but also internationally. So, has there been any other practice areas or any things that have surprised you this year?
So I mean, corporate tax is about as busy as that I've seen it, which is I've found to be it's a difficult another practice area where it's, you could say, candidate dry, where there aren't enough active lawyers looking for a new role, active candidates to service all the work and all the vacancies. So that surprised me. I think, as we mentioned, disputes is extremely busy, and it's the niche areas of finance I think that surprised me most. Well, I don't say surprised. How various areas of structured finance, fund finance continue to be so busy, and the demand is such that it's very difficult to find people. So still a bit surprised by that. But firms haven't really lowered their, I was going to say lowered standards, the wrong term. Despite how busy these practice areas are, it would normally, you would assume, in fact, it'd be reasonable to assume that they would want to look for candidates from further afield in order to meet the demand. Not necessarily seeing that. The criteria for those who can and should be considered, coming from a very elite firm background with no moves, been at a certain level, in more cases than not, firms are sticking with that, even if it takes 6 months, a year to find the appropriate candidate.
And then looking into 2026, like, what do you predict? Do you predict that we'll see very much the same as this year? Do you think there'll be other practice areas that come into play? And I think if you look at, you know, obviously private equity and corporate is the badge of a lot of these big shops, and particularly our clients. Like, but is there any support acts to the practice areas that you think will come into play next year?
Yeah, well, I think pleasingly, we are kind of busy across the practice areas. So if you broadly think of disputes, advisory practice areas, or those which are focused on predominantly advisory work, and then deals practice areas, they're all pretty busy. So I expect we are to see more of the same. I think if there is improving macroeconomic headlines, we could see when they continue to pick up, which would be fantastic. But we're seeing a lot of competition roles, financial service regulation roles, so those advisory practice areas, along with how disputes. So it's busy across the board. You have to assume that disputes is busy, perhaps because plenty of the deals that happened during the COVID boom, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, now a dispute. So to the extent that will continue, or the recruitment market reflecting how busy it is will continue, we'll see. But I certainly think deals will continue to be busy because it's been a case of gradual improvement over 2-3 years in that regard. It doesn't seem there's going to be anything to necessarily to stop that anytime soon, but of course we'll have to wait and see.
And I think in your job, as well as leading a team, you're also very much on the tools of speaking to lawyers on a day to day. So, what do you think are the key drivers around why a lawyer is looking to leave their firm at the moment?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time earlier in the year studying this, and we were looking to assess people's motivations, and it was around quality of work, compensation, promotion prospects largely. I don't see anything that's changed that from earlier in the year. There is we are in an environment where you can be working extremely hard and know that you can be better compensated elsewhere for the same hours, in some cases for improved hours. So that motivation to move is there. There is a slight, as I've sort of touched on, we're in a market whereby the ideal candidate for some of these firms is someone who's doing the exact role somewhere else. Maybe that's always the case, and some firms are willing to stick to that as opposed to look to where someone may not be doing the same sort of transaction. So compensation, and and the more senior you move through the associate ranks, it's about promotion prospects. So that's primarily to get you need the quality of work you need to develop that you want to do. You need to be in a stable team with good prospects, and then be compensated for the hours you're doing. I think these are the key motivating factors. Where we are, people are nervous in moving in the current market as well. There are lots of reasons to stay where you are. There's the perception that AI will change the role of a certainly associate lawyer initially, means that perhaps you're best off staying where you are. So there's a little fear about the unknown as well. So, but that's that. So we are hearing that as a reason to stay put. But in the same breath, I think we will see in 2026, depending on which firms adopt which legal tech, which AI programs, will determine where they feel their career is best served. So I think there's going to be not really seeing it right now, but starting to hear a few people be concerned about will they develop are they in the right firm for the next 3 years based on what tech and what AI tools their team is looking to bring in.
It's great points. I think when a lawyer is looking to make a move, there's a lot of sweat equity to leave on the table. They're making a move to at a competitor or to a different law firm, in the sense that when you started your career as a graduate and you worked your way up to an associate, sometimes even a senior associate, there's a lot of trust and credibility you've gained in terms of getting the right deals, in terms of just in your overall brand within that law firm, which is it's tough to leave on the table. So on the firm side, how are they best positioning themselves in terms of attracting and retaining the best legal talent in the market today?
Well, they're often well compensated and have very attractive bonuses. Uh, I think firms are conscious. Culture plays a huge part. I think firms are very conscious that their culture is key, certainly to those sort of more junior and mid-level associates. Um, I think there is a lot of there is I feel more care and attention put into retention now than there has been. It's very expensive to lose a very good lawyer, certainly to replace them, and it can take a lot of time. And so I think there's been a lot of shift in the market. So I think firms are very conscious that they can lose future stars very easily now. A lawyer has generally speaking, a lot of choice in the market. So there has to be looked after. As to how they're doing that, I think they are putting effort in to the extent that, ultimately, you either can pay someone which they feel is satisfactory for the hours they're working. You can offer them a path to seniority which they're satisfied with, or you can't. Or you have enough work to keep them satisfied as the work you want to do. Those being the key motivators. If one of those is out of sync, and it will niggle an ambitious lawyer and give them cause to think about the market. So I think firms are slightly limited in what they can offer in that regard.
It's interesting because you talk about brand and culture at a law firm, and a lot of the pushback we get from lawyers when we present them with roles, that the roles aren't advertised on a law firm website. But in actual fact, if a firm is super busy across private equity or corporate, consistently busy, and they're consistently hiring, they're not going to want to have published on their website consistently over 12 to 16 months that they're hiring across corporate, because then it thinks that they can't fill, you think that they can't fill the role. So, in terms of a lawyer that's, looking about making a move, and you present them and the roles are advertised on the website, what advice would you give those lawyers?
Yeah, well, recruitment happens behind closed doors, and if you put it like the higher paying the firm, so it's typically um, those which you may think have a wider choice of lawyers to select if they want to hire. That's even more the case. So, um, this is really akin to those busy practice areas. You can't just click your fingers and immediately a partner can't click their fingers and decide they need to hire, instruct their internal recruitment team, and they go to market and have CVs by the end of the day. The only reason they can have CVs by the end of the day is if they have a culture where they are accepting them weeks, months beforehand. The internal recruiter has a bank of people CVs that they already know are interested. The best service that internal recruiter can give that partner is to immediately send them 3 perfect candidates when they say, "I want to hire." They can only do that if they are being sent those candidates by the recruiters they work with. Typically, it would come from a recruiter, and the same with the partner. And therefore, there are certain key practice areas where we are expected to send in people who, as and when we can find them, who are good enough and who fit that firm's sort of culture and aspirations. And they're very hard to find, and they know that they can't just stop. So they are constantly collecting CVs and people's interest to the extent that they may interview someone straight away, or if it may have to wait a month or two, is different. But people should understand that that is how much recruitment goes on at the top tier. And therefore, if you are the one if you're motivated to make a move yourself, as opposed to being very happy where you are and we may headhunt you for a position, in which case we're trying to attract you away. If you have motivation to move and are looking to do that, then you have to understand that being proactive with certain practice areas at the top tier is how it works. You should take advantage of that. If you don't, you're at the mercy of the market, where if a firm were to advertise a role, and you apply, maybe it takes a day or two to get a CV together or think about it, you're already in the third tier of candidates for that role, because there will be a group of highly motivated people who've already applied before there was a role. You'll have those who are submitted within an hour of finding out, and then there'll be you. So it's always in your interest to be proactive if you have motivations to make the move.
It's being proactive from a client and a candidate side. The best relationships that I personally have with law firms and recruitment leaders at law firms is having touch points weekly about what's happening in the market, who's hiring, what they're doing, how can we position ourselves in such a way that when we are looking to hire, that we're able to move fast and have the right people briefed. And similarly, on the candidate side, it's a case of, if I eventually want to move to a certain jurisdiction or a certain law firm, what am I doing right now to set myself up so when that law firm looks to hire, I'm top of the list. So it's having those conversations early, and I think it's moving towards that that partner model where it's not a case of just making a move and deciding you're making a move and then 2 weeks later at the firm. It's about really building out a plan and a strategy with your recruiter around, from a law firm perspective, how do I make this hire? On the candidate side, how can I get into that law firm?
Yeah.
So as we look forward to 2026, it's been a turbulent 18 months in the legal recruitment market in the UK. But what can you expect in 2026? And also, if I'm a lawyer at a law firm and I'm looking at them, I'm at a 4 or 5 year mark, and I'm thinking to myself, 2026 is the year that I'm going to make a move. How can I position myself to make sure that I'm going to land in the right spot?
If you have a niggling doubt that you have to move, you must act on that immediately, because it can take 6 months, a year, to find the right opportunity and then go through a recruitment process, be offered the role, and then actually start in it. A lot of people waste a lot of time when they know they need to move, but they don't do anything about it. Or maybe they take the attitude that I'll wait for a recruiter to approach me about something that I'm interested in, or I'll wait for a role to, a job to be advertised, which enthuses me. You must act sooner. So advice for lawyers in 2026 who think, particularly if you use the example of someone who's around 4 or 5 PQE, as you move through 6, 7, and 8, you need to be in the firm where you want to make partnership. You need to be out there at 4 or 5 PQE, so you can position yourself. If you're not in it already, you need to be in it so you can have a year to bed in, position yourself well, and then go for it over the next 3 years. If you delay that because you aren't being proactive, you could leave it too late and you join a merry-go-round of people who are 6, 7, 8 looking for a role to allow them to work towards partnership, where there's less opportunity than there is at 4, 5. So it doesn't matter if you're 4, 5 or 6, 7 PQE or 1 or 2. If there are reasons, if you are motivated to move, you must be proactive and reach out, because you need to be in your future firm as soon as possible for your career.
Sage advice. Awesome. Another great conversation, JT.